I got transported into a book as the malicious supporting male character and found myself cornering the second female lead in an alley, preparing to force a kiss on her. Facing the person who would later rise to great heights, with just one finger she could crush me, I suddenly felt my legs go weak. Is it too late to hold onto her thigh now? I fell asleep reading a novel, and when I woke up, I found myself inside the book. I became the most hated villain in the whole story, who shares my name, Sebastian. At this very moment, I was leading a group of lackeys, blocking the second female lead, Victoria, in the alley. The girl, pushed against the wall, was wearing a blue and white school uniform. She was slender with fair skin, her smooth black hair falling naturally, a bruise at the corner of her left mouth standing out starkly against her pale face. However, she remained silent and obstinate, her cold black eyes staring at me. I felt my legs go weak. Of all times to get transported, why now? The novel was cliché and melodramatic. Victoria had secretly loved the male lead for many years, but because of her poor family background and her deafness in one ear, she kept her feelings hidden, choosing to protect him silently. Meanwhile, I, Sebastian, a proud and arrogant rich kid, became obsessed with Victoria. After being rejected by her publicly, I brought people to block her in the alley. But that's not the main issue. The main issue was that on this day, her grandmother suddenly had a high blood pressure episode. Because I delayed her return home, she couldn't send her grandmother to the hospital in time, leading to her grandmother's death. From then on, Victoria hated me. Later, after discovering I was still targeting the male lead, the now successful Victoria finally started her revenge, causing my family to go bankrupt and sending me to prison. Today was the critical turning point. Looking at the girl's delicate face just inches away, I could kiss her if I leaned in a bit more. Thinking about my tragic end in the book, I stepped back with weak legs. The crowd began to jeer. "What's wrong, Sebastian? You haven't even kissed her yet." I gritted my teeth and pretended to be indifferent. What's the point of forcing it? One day she'll beg me to kiss her. At my words, the crowd burst into laughter and cheers. Sebastian is amazing. Victoria's expression remained calm and cold, as if she didn't care about the people or the situation. She picked up her bag and started walking away. Watching her thin figure disappear around the corner, I also turned to leave. But after taking a few steps, I remembered her grandmother's situation and couldn't help but worry. As if something was under my foot, I looked down and found Victoria's name tag. Picking it up, I quickly said goodbye to everyone and got into my family's car, asking the driver to head to Victoria's house. I hope nothing happens. After all, I don't want a tragic end. The car stopped in front of an old apartment building. I jumped out and saw Victoria's figure ahead. She turned to look at me, frowning slightly. "What do you want?" she asked coldly. I hurriedly confirmed her grandmother's condition, blurting out impulsively, "Can't you see? I'm following you." Victoria was speechless. I almost bit my tongue. What was I saying? Even being a rogue has basic principles. I paused, seeing her resistant attitude, and decided to try a gentler approach. "Since I'm here, won't you invite me in?" Of course, Victoria didn't agree. She just stared at me, her eyes cold and distant. I pouted. "Fine, if you don't want to, then forget it. Do you think I care?" Turning to get back in the car, I asked the driver to take a turn at the next intersection. In the rearview mirror, I saw Victoria walking into the narrow alley. "Uncle Chin, park on the side," I said, counting the time silently. 10 minutes later, a panicked voice came from the alley. "Victoria, hurry, get a car." An auntie screamed desperately. This was my chance. I had the driver turn back and lower the car window, shouting at the tense Victoria. "Victoria!" She looked up in surprise. At the hospital, the doctor said with relief, "It's good you brought her in time. Another 20 minutes and her condition would have been dangerous." Hearing the doctor's words, I finally felt relieved. We got through this crisis smoothly. I happily paid the hospital fees, thinking this should offset some of my previous wrongdoings against Victoria. The Sebastian in the book was an overbearing rich kid, spoiled by his parents. Although he was just a high school senior, his allowance was substantial, much more than what I, who grew up in an orphanage, ever had. Especially since this involved my life, I didn't mind spending the money. Returning to the hospital, I saw Victoria coming out of the ward, leaning against the wall with her head slightly bowed. The hallway was filled with the smell of disinfectant, the lights casting a glow on her thin figure. Honestly, with a face like that, who wouldn't be captivated? No wonder the Sebastian in the book was crazy about her. Victoria seemed to sense something and turned to look at me. "I've already paid for your grandmother's hospital fees," I said. Victoria pursed her lips. After a moment, she said, "Thank you. I will repay you as soon as possible." Her family was dirt poor, and she was about to take the college entrance exam. Where would she get the money? Her grades were enough to get into the best universities, but this incident affected her performance, and she didn't get into her dream school. That was also my fault. Now, with 3 months until the college entrance exam, I had to ensure she could take it without any problems. But Victoria was very stubborn. Who knows what she would do to repay the money? Thinking about this, I raised an eyebrow. "No need. To repay me, you can be my tutor." Victoria was genuinely surprised by my suggestion. Her black eyes were full of astonishment. "It's understandable. The original Sebastian probably never opened a textbook." I continued, "You have to help me with my homework every day and tutor me for 3 hours a week. How about that? Any problem?" With just 2 short sentences, I exposed my desire to spend time alone with her. As expected, Victoria's eyebrows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. I added more fuel to the fire, smiling as I leaned in and whispered, "Or how about you just be my girlfriend instead?" Victoria instinctively stepped back, putting some distance between us, a trace of coldness flashing in her eyes. Considering her options, she knew which to choose. "All right, from Friday to Sunday, every night at 9 in the study room," she finally said. Satisfied, I nodded, but my good mood was abruptly halted when I returned to class. I overheard some classmates laughing and talking. "Did you hear? Yesterday, Sebastian confessed to Victoria and got rejected. It's hilarious. Does he really think someone like Victoria would like him?" The words were followed by a burst of laughter from a group of boys. One of them noticed me, his face paling as he nudged the boy who had spoken. The laughter stopped abruptly, and the classroom became so quiet you could hear a pin drop. "See, Sebastian, you're here," one boy stammered, forcing a smile, his face full of tension. It was clear I had a notorious reputation here. Without needing to say anything, just standing there was enough to scare them. Ignoring them, I walked to the back of the classroom, lazily threw my bag onto the desk with a loud thud, making the room even quieter. "Sebastian, the homeroom teacher is looking for you," a boy standing at the door called out. Great, I thought. How could I forget that in the original plot, after blocking Victoria yesterday, someone had told the teacher, leading to me being forced to apologize in front of the whole school. Though I wasn't a top student before, I had always been well-behaved and had never caused any trouble. Thinking about the impending storm, I sighed and walked to the door, only to run into Victoria. She had a Band-Aid on the bruise at the corner of her mouth. I glanced at her quickly and walked out, pretending not to know why the teacher had called me. That boy hesitated and mumbled, "I don't know, you'll find out when you get there." As I left the classroom, I heard the noise picking up again. Looking back, I saw a tall boy standing in front of Victoria. Just one look and I knew it was the male lead, Ethan. I vaguely heard him asking something softly, "Victoria, are you hurt?" To Victoria, Ethan was a ray of light in her dark life. She was willing to give everything for him without asking for anything in return, as long as he was happy. Victoria glanced in my direction for a moment before quickly looking away and shaking her head. Even though she'd been bullied like this, she didn't tell Ethan. In the office, the middle-aged homeroom teacher's face was stern. "Sebastian, do you know why I called you here?" I shook my head. The teacher's frown deepened and she raised her voice. "Someone reported that you and your gang bullied Victoria after school yesterday. Is it true?" Though it was true, I couldn't admit it. I stiffened and said no. "Really? Really? The teacher's face darkened further. You're still lying at this point? Do you think I'll believe anything you say? It was clear she hadn't called me here to ask for my side of the story. She wouldn't believe a word I said. After all, who would believe a troublemaker? She continued, Next Monday at the flag-raising ceremony, you'll give a public apology. I struggled. Miss Jo, I really didn't do it. The teacher sneered. If you don't admit it, that's fine. As long as you can find someone to testify for you, I'll believe you. I was speechless. Imagining my delinquent friends standing in the office to testify for me made my head spin. There was no way out of this. I closed my eyes and said in despair, No one can testify for me. Just then there was a knock on the door, followed by a calm and gentle voice, Miss Jo. I turned around in surprise. It was Victoria. Her eyes were calm as she spoke firmly and politely. I can testify for him. I was shocked. Of all people, it was Victoria who stood up for me. The teacher, however, frowned even more, looking at me before turning to Victoria. Victoria, if anyone is threatening you, don't worry. The school and the teachers will protect you. Victoria shook her head calmly. No one is threatening me. The teacher asked again, Then why did some students see you with him after school yesterday? Victoria paused and explained. He had some questions about his studies and wanted me to tutor him. The teacher's eyes widened in disbelief. What? Any teacher would have been shocked to hear this, but Victoria had already given me a way out. Not taking it would be impolite. I made up an excuse, lowering my head with a sad tone. My parents are getting divorced. I thought if I did well in my exams, they might stay together. My poor parents, sorry. My father was a nouveau riche who married my mother because she was beautiful. After a near-fatal childbirth, they only had me, and I was spoiled rotten. The teacher's expression softened, and after a moment she said to Victoria, Helping classmates is a good thing, but don't let it affect your studies. You're about to take the college entrance exam. I wasn't offended. After all, my grades couldn't get any worse. As I walked out of the office, I let out a long sigh of relief. Sebastian, did the teacher give you a hard time? A boy with a buzz cut suddenly appeared. I recognized him as one of my lackeys from yesterday. Noticing Victoria beside me, he became alert and stood between us, his tone fierce. Did you rat him out to the teacher? Victoria's expression was cold as she silently walked past him. Don't go. Seeing the guy about to lose his temper, I quickly pulled him back. George, don't speak nonsense. You're dealing with someone who can destroy me in an instant in the future. If you show off now, Victoria will remember it and blame me later. George looked puzzled but didn't argue further. He scratched his head and then cheerfully handed me a beer. Sebastian, your favorite. I declined it outright. George then asked, Hey Sebastian, are you coming to the pool hall tonight? I hesitated. I didn't really want to go, but I also couldn't change too abruptly overnight without raising suspicion. Suddenly, Victoria turned and glanced over. Thinking quickly, I said, Go where? I have something important to do tonight. George was curious. What important thing? Night study, I said slowly. George was dumbfounded. No way, Sebastian. You don't even go to regular classes and now you're going to night study? I kicked him lightly. You don't understand. Night study is way more important than anything you guys have planned. I figured this was a great opportunity to win over Victoria. No one should interfere with my plan. Victoria withdrew her gaze, seemingly indifferent. I quickly caught up with her. Victoria, it's Friday today. You promised to help me with my homework. Don't forget. Victoria didn't respond. Remembering her deafness in her right ear, I moved closer and repeated, You can't back out now. She finally nodded slightly. Okay. After returning to class with Victoria, the atmosphere felt odd all day. My classmates kept glancing at me and then at Victoria, their faces full of gossip. I didn't care and returned to my seat, relieved I didn't have to give a public apology next week. Who cares what they think? As soon as I sat down, the boy in front of me turned around, his face full of concern. Sebastian, why did the homeroom teacher call you over? Did she criticize you? I looked at him and slowly raised an eyebrow. This was Sebastian's only real friend, Tony. In some ways, the term follower was more accurate. Tony's family was poor, with 6 people squeezed into a small house. This environment had cultivated his submissive and people-pleasing personality. Since the first year of high school, he had been by Sebastian's side, doing his homework, forging notes, and covering for him with teachers. Sebastian's success owed a lot to him, so Sebastian trusted him greatly. But in reality, Tony felt he had been exploited and bullied by Sebastian for years, harboring deep resentment. Later, he chose to betray Sebastian and even deliberately informed Sebastian's parents when he was taken away by Victoria's people, leading to their car accident and death. I quietly observed Tony's seemingly concerned face. "How did you know she was going to criticize me?" Tony was stunned, a flicker of panic in his eyes. He lowered his voice and said, "I didn't. I just guessed. Everyone knows about what happened with Victoria yesterday." I sneered inwardly, thinking, "Of course you're the one who reported it." I leaned back in my chair, opened my bag, and started pulling out books. So what? I confessed publicly and almost forced a kiss in front of everyone. It's hard to keep it a secret. Tony seemed to sense my coldness and wisely didn't bring it up again. Instead, he reached for my worksheets. "I forgot to take your worksheets yesterday. Let me finish them for you. The teacher will go over them this afternoon." I had to admit, Tony was smart. He appeared cooperative but never got involved in any of Sebastian's messes. It wasn't until Sebastian's downfall that he realized Tony also liked Victoria and resented how Sebastian treated her. I twisted my wrist to avoid his reach and tossed the worksheets onto Victoria's desk, one aisle away. "Victoria, I haven't done these yet." The entire class fell silent. Victoria glanced at me, and I nodded towards the worksheets. "The teacher will go over them this afternoon." After a moment, Victoria placed my worksheets on her physics book and started working on them. For her, these problems were as easy as drinking water. She barely had to think before solving them. Tony's face turned exceptionally awkward. He couldn't help but ask, "Sebastian, why is she doing your homework? Or what's going on?" I smiled meaningfully and said, "Didn't you ask why the homeroom teacher called me over?" "It's because of an early relationship, of course." A scratching sound interrupted us. Victoria's hand paused, leaving a long mark on the worksheet. "Sebastian." Victoria's brow furrowed slightly, a hint of warning in her eyes. Knowing I had gone too far, I quickly smiled. Just a joke between classmates. After yesterday, I knew Victoria wouldn't hold me accountable for such remarks. Anyone with eyes could see that she and I couldn't be in a relationship. Clearing my name while giving Tony a hard time was a win-win. In my peripheral vision, Tony seemed relieved but still looked uneasy, silently turning to study his vocabulary. I took out my textbook and sighed inwardly. Before getting transported into the book, I was already a second-year college student. Who would have thought that just by reading a novel in my dorm, I'd have to go through the college entrance exam again? I'd forgotten all my high school knowledge. What a nightmare. After a whole day of classes, I was exhausted, collapsing onto my desk. Someone knocked on the window. "Sebastian." I opened one eye and saw George standing outside with a few lackeys. One of them greeted me, "Sebastian, come hang out. What's the point of self-study?" They'd all come together to invite me. If I were the real Sebastian, I'd be thrilled. Unfortunately, I'm not him. I sat up slowly and looked at George. "Did you bring me the candy I asked for?" "Oh, right, here it is, Sebastian," George said, slapping his forehead and handing over a bag. The next second, I looked into the bag and saw cigarettes instead of candy. I gritted my teeth. "George, I asked for candy, not cigarettes." George looked puzzled. "But Sebastian, you always loved this stuff." It was clear that changing my image wouldn't happen overnight. Taking a deep breath, I said, "I don't like it anymore, got it?" George, still puzzled, quickly took the bag back. "All right, Sebastian, I'll go get candy right away." 10 minutes later, a box of fruit candies appeared on my desk. Waving my hand, I said, "You guys can go now. It's 9 o'clock, and I need to go to the study room." They followed me to the study room, hesitating at the door. "Are you serious, Sebastian?" "Of course I'm serious," I said, feeling the candy box in my pocket. "By the way, no more cigarettes. I'm switching to candy." George looked nervous. "Sebastian, what's gotten into you?" Ignoring him, I unwrapped a candy and put it in my mouth. "Victoria doesn't like cigarettes, understand?" They all jeered in unison. "Oh, we see." Victoria was indeed a universal shield. Everyone knew Sebastian liked her, so everything he did for her seemed normal. Finally, I managed to get rid of them and stepped into the study room. To my surprise, Victoria was already there. Startled, I thought, "Did she hear everything I said outside?" Victoria looked up, her pale, delicate face calm. Relieved, I walked over and sat to her left. Victoria asked softly, "Where should we start?" I casually took out the worksheet she had helped me with earlier. "Here." Victoria reminded me. "The teacher already covered this in the afternoon," I replied. "He didn't explain it as well as you do. The real Sebastian was a terrible student, so having Victoria explain it again was logical." Victoria hesitated for a moment, but seemed used to my way of talking and started explaining. Seeing her about to draw an auxiliary line, I instinctively leaned closer. Victoria suddenly stopped and asked, "What flavor is the candy you're eating?" "Lychee," I replied, resting my head on my hand. "Want to try?" Victoria's eyelashes trembled slightly as she moved a bit further from me. "No, thanks." As expected, no rumors of early dating spread after Victoria and I started studying together. Instead, they gossiped about me becoming a hard-working student for her. During PE class, I sat in the stands looking at the sky with sorrow. Let them gossip. Being her admirer is better than being her enemy. Still, in the future, I won't be able to keep up with her, I thought. Tony sat next to me cautiously, saying, "Sebastian, you're working so hard. But she doesn't seem to notice. Maybe you should give up. I think she likes Ethan." I glanced at him. "Really?" Tony panicked. I just heard. Yesterday she asked Rosemary what gift to get for a boy. Ethan's birthday is coming up. Leaning back in my chair, I thought, I know she likes Ethan. She made a wooden sculpture of a cello for him and secretly placed it on his desk on his birthday. But he never knew it was from her. That's why she's the second female lead. Silent admiration can't compete with the main female lead, I thought. "Sebastian, are you not mad?" Tony asked softly. Laughing, I replied, "Why should I be?" Tony was speechless. Suddenly, George appeared with a badminton racket. "Sebastian, up for a game?" Startled, I said, "George, you scared me." George grinned. "I couldn't find anyone to play with. Give me a game, Sebastian." Badminton was one of Sebastian's few strengths and something I could relate to. "Fine," I said, taking the racket. While playing, I noticed Victoria running nearby. She seemed to sense my gaze and glanced over. I waved the racket and called, "Victoria!" She didn't respond, her gaze lingering briefly on the racket before turning away. Sighing, I thought, after all this time, we still haven't gotten closer. Victoria ignored me completely. George, oblivious to her presence, walked beside me and said, "Sebastian, that shuttlecock you're using is too old. I got a new one. What do you think?" I took the new shuttlecock from him and looked up to see Victoria already running away. Her slender figure was thin but determined. I felt a bit puzzled. Victoria was a quiet and reserved person, usually running like this when she was stressed or upset. Who had upset her? Just then, a cheer erupted from the nearby volleyball court. Someone seemed to be shouting, "Tiffany!" I glanced over and saw a girl jumping up to spike the ball, her movements fluid and earning applause. This was the female lead, Ethan's match. She was at the bottom of the class academically, just like me, and had dated a dozen boyfriends. Yet, Ethan had fallen for her. To be fair, Tiffany was indeed attractive. Unlike Victoria's cold and distant demeanor, Tiffany had a wild charm that made her popular. Since getting together with Ethan, Tiffany had changed her ways. But their relationship had its ups and downs due to differences in family background and mindset. It took years for them to finally be together. Turning my head, I spotted Ethan among the crowd, watching from a distance with a clear look of affection on his face. After playing badminton with George for a while, I took a break and noticed Victoria still running. The wind blew, outlining her slender waist in her blue and white school uniform, her long legs particularly eye-catching. Wow, this girl has some stamina, I thought. But it also meant she was in a bad mood. The volleyball court was right next to us, and she must have noticed Ethan watching Tiffany. Seeing the guy she liked paying attention to another girl would upset anyone. I decided to run over to her. "Victoria," I called, running backward to face her. "Are you upset?" Her bangs were slightly damp with sweat, but her black eyes remained calm and cold. "No." I didn't believe her. "I can tell. We've spent enough time together for me to notice. Why are you upset? Tell me, and I'll help you figure it out." Victoria suddenly looked up at me, a flicker of emotion in her eyes, but it quickly faded. "It's none of your business." Was it my imagination, or did her tone seem colder than usual today? My heart tightened. If just seeing Ethan like this made her so upset, how would she feel when he and Tiffany were together? I couldn't hold back. "Victoria, don't like Ethan. You two can't be together." Victoria finally stopped running, her brow furrowed. "What?" I coughed. "What I mean is," before I could finish, I felt a cold wind behind me. "Watch out." Victoria's expression changed and she yanked me aside. I heard a dull thud and turned to see a soccer ball rolling on the ground. It had been aimed at me but hit Victoria instead when she pushed me away. Outside the school infirmary, I waited anxiously. The doctor finally came out and I rushed over. "Doctor, how is Victoria? Is she okay?" The doctor sighed. "Don't worry. She's injured, but not seriously. Just apply some bruise ointment for a few days and she'll be fine." I finally relaxed, but still couldn't shake my worry. If anything happened to her, I couldn't bear it. "I'll go check on her," I said, pushing past the doctor and pulling back the curtain. "Victoria, are you?" My words caught in my throat. Victoria was changing clothes. Her slender figure was actually quite graceful, with a bruise on her shoulder blade. Hearing me, Victoria paused, then screamed, and I was promptly kicked out. I stood there, stunned, until Victoria finally opened the door and broke the silence. "I'm fine." Her cold voice brought me back to my senses. My mind went blank as I stammered, That's good. I just wanted to make sure you're okay." For some reason, I felt incredibly guilty and couldn't meet her eyes. "Thank you for today, Victoria." "No need," she replied. I glanced at her secretly. She seemed fine, but I had clearly seen the bruise on her back and smelled the faint scent of ointment. Suddenly, I remembered the sweet scent unique to her when she pushed me away. It was like an impenetrable net enveloping me. I bit my lip. "Victoria, you don't have to do this." Victoria stopped beside me. "Do what?" I took a deep breath. "Paying for your grandmother's medical bills was nothing to me. You don't need to repay me like this." Young Victoria had nothing but herself. If I hadn't lent her money, she wouldn't have to repay it by helping someone she hated. Victoria was silent for a long time, long enough for me to start wondering if I had said something wrong. Finally, she spoke again, her voice cold and distant. "You're overthinking it. I know what I'm doing. I don't need anyone to tell me." I felt a bit panicked and inexplicably depressed. Was it her words or her tone? We had spent so many nights studying together that I had forgotten she was someone I absolutely could not mess with. Worried about her injury needing time to heal and with only a month left until the college entrance exam, I gritted my teeth and said, "You should rest and heal. You don't need to come to night study for the rest of the time." Victoria was silent for a moment, a flicker of an unrecognizable emotion in her eyes as she walked away. "Got it. Are you serious, Sebastian? She did all that for you and you're saying you're not together?" George was shocked, and a few lackeys chimed in. "Yeah, we all heard. She pushed Sebastian away, and that ball hit her hard. Sebastian is so handsome and treats her so well. How could she not like him?" I clicked my tongue impatiently. Why are you all so nosy? If you like talking so much, go give a speech on the podium. They finally quieted down. Sigh. They were too young to understand Victoria. Someone like her hated owing favors. I had helped her a lot, and though she didn't say it, she must remember it clearly. And I knew she liked Ethan. George spoke up. But Sebastian, your mock exam scores improved a lot. If this keeps up, you'll ace the college entrance exam. I raised an eyebrow. Of course. When has Sebastian ever failed at anything he wanted? Of course, that was a bit of boasting. The improvement was mainly due to Victoria. She explained problems clearly and patiently, even if I had to ask her several times. For George and the others, scoring 400 was great, and 500 meant being a top student. Back home, my parents praised me enthusiastically. I knew our Sebastian could do it. Look how much he's improved, Dad said, grinning. Mom gave him a playful slap and patted my shoulder gently. Sebastian, don't put too much pressure on yourself. Your health matters most to us. I felt a warmth in my heart. It's nothing. I recently realized studying isn't that hard. Dad waved his hand. Sebastian, tell me what you want. I'll make sure you get it. A clear face flashed in my mind and I hesitated. With the college entrance exam coming up, I want a private tutor for the final push. Dad's efficiency was impressive. The next day, he hired a famous tutor from our city. From then on, I never went to night study again. Though Victoria and I were in the same class, we inexplicably grew distant. One day, Tony casually asked about it. Without thinking, I replied, "Every second counts before the college entrance exam. Victoria's aiming for top universities. If I delayed her, I couldn't afford it." Just as I finished speaking, Victoria walked by, our shoulders brushing. I glanced at her guiltily. Her profile was calm as if she didn't care. I sighed in relief, suppressing the unidentifiable emotions and focusing on my work. A month flew by, and the college entrance exam ended. Someone in the class suggested a party. Surprisingly, Rosemary invited me. "Sebastian, we're having a party tonight. Want to join?" I was surprised, and she noticed my hesitation. After graduation, everyone will go their separate ways. It's hard to meet again. Everyone's going. Give us a break. With the invitation worded like that, how could I refuse? All right. The party was lively. I sipped juice, my mind elsewhere. Tonight, Victoria was planning to confess to Ethan. Her hidden crush had grown, and she could no longer hide it. She finally gathered the courage to confess on this day of bidding farewell to youth. Unfortunately, Tiffany also showed up, and Victoria never got the chance to confess. Everything seemed to be following the book's plot. The only difference was my presence at the party. Who knew if it would affect anything? As dinner wrapped up, someone suggested a truth or dare game with a bottle. Whoever the bottle pointed to had to answer a question truthfully. Everyone eagerly agreed, and the first person chosen was Victoria. Rosemary seemed to do it on purpose and asked loudly, "Victoria, do you like someone?" Everyone started making a fuss. Many people in school liked Victoria, but no one knew who she liked. I couldn't help but look at Victoria across the room, and our eyes met. I quickly looked away, pretending to check my phone. Then I heard Victoria's voice. "Yes." The room fell silent for a moment, then erupted. "Who? Is it someone from our school? What do they look like? Are you together?" My heart skipped a beat. Victoria said yes. She admitted it. But didn't the book say she never confessed to Ethan? And now she admitted it? Rosemary laughed. "That's multiple questions. You can only answer one at a time." Though Rosemary said only one question at a time, everyone was eager to dig into Victoria's gossip. So they kept trying to turn the bottle towards Victoria, failing several times. "Sebastian, you try," someone said, handing me the task. Feeling a bit absent-minded, I spun the bottle casually. To my surprise, it slowly came to a stop, pointing at Victoria. The room fell silent. Seriously? Everyone knew I liked Victoria, We had all agreed that whoever the bottle pointed to would continue with the same question. Tony glanced around, trying to break the ice. "Sebastian, it's just a game. Ask whatever you want." "Thanks," I thought sarcastically. If I didn't ask, I'd look scared. But if I asked, it felt like setting myself up for humiliation. My mind racing, I leaned back casually in my chair and looked at Victoria, smiling. "Victoria, is the person you like here?" Patting myself on the back internally, I thought, great question. There are 16 people here, evenly split between boys and girls. No matter how she answers, she can't go wrong. Unless she says Ethan's name directly, no one could figure out who she really likes. Everyone was surprised by my question. After 3 seconds, they snapped out of it and eagerly looked at Victoria. Even Tony beside me gripped his cup tightly, nervously awaiting her answer. I was the calmest one, knowing the answer. Actually, there was one more person who wasn't as invested, and that was Ethan. He kept glancing at his phone, clearly waiting for Tiffany. Sighing inwardly, I thought, the second female lead's fate is sealed. Ethan will never belong to Victoria. Her feelings will forever remain in the shadows. Lost in thought, I heard Victoria's cold voice. "Yes." After a brief silence, the room erupted in excitement. "Who is it? Is Victoria about to confess?" My heart skipped a beat. I looked at her and saw she was staring at Ethan, her dark eyes focused and serene. Despite knowing the answer, my chest felt tight. Why is she so stubborn? I already warned her not to like Ethan, I thought, just as my phone buzzed with a message from George. "Sebastian, are you done over there? Ready for round 2? My friends knew I had agreed to join the class dinner, so they waited to meet up later. I picked up my phone. "Sorry, my friends are waiting. I'll head out first. This meal's on me, enjoy." Not looking at Victoria again, I stood up and left. George and the others had chosen a barbecue place. I hadn't eaten much at the dinner, thinking I'd indulge at the barbecue spot. But I still had no appetite, downing 3 bottles of pineapple beer instead. "Sebastian, it's a big day. You don't seem too happy," one lackey observed, munching on a skewer. I glared at him. "Amazing how you can eat so happily and still care about me." George chimed in. "Give it a rest. Sebastian is the only serious student here. He worked hard these past months, lost weight, unlike you all gaining 10 pounds. Stop eating. That's for Sebastian," he scolded. I waved it off. "Doesn't matter. I can't eat anyway. Waste not, want not." Maybe it was the sudden free time after the exams that made me feel empty. Another lackey suggested, "Sebastian, let's play some pool. You haven't played in a while." I didn't know how to play, but I was genuinely irritated. "Sure." Following George and the others to our usual pool hall, I immediately flopped onto the couch. "Not playing?" A guy, the owner and a friend of Sebastian's, approached. "Heartbroken," he teased. Rolling my eyes, I retorted, "You're heartbroken. Your whole family is heartbroken." He chuckled. "Must be serious." "Just get me a table, will ya?" I said, waving him off. He walked away, muttering about heartbroken men being scary. George and the others didn't force me to play, starting their own game instead. I lounged on the couch, bored. At this time, Victoria's dinner should be over, I thought, when my phone suddenly rang. It was an unknown number. Curious, I answered, "Hello? Who is this?" "Sebastian, you left something behind." I froze. It was Victoria. She had called me. What did I leave behind? Looking around, I realized my wallet was missing. "Sorry, did I leave my wallet with you? Where are you? I'll come get it." "At the restaurant. I'm waiting here," she replied. "Okay, I'm on my way." Rubbing my temples, I thought, what a day. I'd be lost without Victoria's reminder. Explaining to George and the others, they insisted on coming with me. "No need, I'm just picking something up." "It's late. You all keep playing," I said, heading out alone. I took a taxi to the restaurant and saw a slender figure standing at the corner from a distance. It was Victoria. She seemed to sense my presence and turned around. Under the night sky, the neon lights cast a warm glow on her delicate face. making her dark eyes shimmer. My heart seemed to beat faster. Taking a deep breath, I got out of the taxi and walked towards her. "Sorry for troubling you so late. Have you been waiting long?" Victoria shook her head. "No, the party just ended." I didn't notice her use of the word "also" because my first thought was, "It's over. What happened after I left? Did she confess to Ethan?" But that wasn't something I could ask, so I smiled at her. "Thanks. If it weren't for you, I would have lost my wallet." She handed me the wallet, and our fingers brushed. Despite the early summer heat, her hand was still cool, like an electric current spreading from the touch. I quickly pulled my hand back. "Thanks." "No problem," Victoria replied, then suddenly asked, "Did you drink?" I was about to deny it but changed my mind, just a little. Victoria didn't say anything else. The matter was settled, and it was time to say goodbye. I hesitated for 3 seconds before calling her name. "Victoria, I feel a bit unsteady. Can you walk me to the corner? The road is narrow, and my driver's car might have trouble getting in." Victoria paused, then nodded. "Okay." I don't know where I got the courage, but I took half a step forward and smiled. "I also feel weak. Can I lean on your shoulder?" This was something Sebastian would say. Yes, I silently convinced myself. Victoria stepped back, a fleeting look of disappointment in her eyes. The night wind was still warm, but my face felt even hotter. I didn't know how things had escalated to this point. Victoria actually agreed to my unreasonable request. Feeling her soft black hair and the warmth of her body through the thin fabric, my heart nearly lost control. She was really thin. I wondered if my arm on her shoulder felt too heavy. Time seemed to stretch infinitely, like melted chocolate pulling out long, tangled threads. But in an instant we reached the corner, and I could hear the sound of cars honking ahead. I leaned closer and whispered in her right ear, "Victoria, I really like you." After that night, I didn't see Victoria again. Everything that happened seemed to be sealed away forever, until the college entrance exam results came out and Victoria scored 701, becoming the top student in the city. Her name was everywhere in the overwhelming publicity. My long-held anxiety finally eased. This time, Victoria's future wasn't ruined because of me. Everything went as I had hoped. But why didn't I feel as happy as I imagined? Thinking it over, I decided to visit Victoria's house one last time. With the exam results out, as long as her grandmother was healthy, this chapter would be closed. She and Sebastian were never meant to be together. After today, we would go our separate ways. This would be my final farewell. I arrived at Victoria's house in the evening, only to see a few people blocking her at the alley entrance. "Victoria, I can't believe you did so well on the exam." "Yeah, our family is so proud of you. I always knew you'd be successful. Look at you, top student in the city." "Victoria, you must have received a lot of scholarships. Your cousin is getting married soon and our family is short on money. Can you lend us some? Don't worry. We'll pay you back when we have the money." Hearing this, I finally understood who these people were. Victoria's parents had died early, and her relatives saw her as a burden, cutting ties with her long ago. The original story briefly mentioned that after Victoria went to college and started her own business, these relatives pestered her for money. They were just stepping stones on her path to success, mentioned only in passing. Her running on the school track and her worried expression gradually became clear in my mind. Only now did I realize that every bit of pain was real for young Victoria. Her life was never smooth. Victoria had her back to me, so I couldn't see her expression. I only heard her cold voice. "I have no money." The people immediately changed their expressions. "Who would believe that? We saw you on TV getting scholarships. Victoria, we've known you since you were little. You can't just forget your roots now that you're successful." Victoria ignored them and turned to leave. One of the men, about 25 or 26, pushed her against the wall. "You little brat, who do you think you are?" Victoria didn't say a word. My anger flared up. "What are you doing?" The people in the alley turned to look at me, and Victoria also glanced back, her eyes filled with surprise. The man who had pushed her looked me up and down, then turned to Victoria with a strange smile. "Oh, you've got yourself a rich boyfriend now?" Victoria's expression turned icy. "He has nothing to do with me, I don't know him." "Do you think I'll believe that?" the man sneered. "That watch on his wrist must be worth at least 10 grand. You say you have no money? Fine, let him pay for you." I laughed. "Your eyes are sharp, but you're an idiot. Do you know extortion is a crime?" Their expressions turned ugly. The man charged at me. "You think you can mess with me?" Bam! I coldly kicked him hard in the stomach. I never thought my first fight in this world would be in such a situation. I'm not one to seek trouble, but I'm not afraid of it either. At first they tried to fight back, but soon they were begging for mercy, their faces bruised and swollen. I ignored their pleas, grabbing the man who had pushed Victoria and was about to slam his head against the wall when I heard a loud thud behind me. Turning around, I saw a man who had tried to sneak up on me with a knife, now clutching his head and crouching on the ground. Victoria stood there trembling, holding half a brick, her face pale with fear. "Victoria, what are you doing?" I shouted, snapping her out of her daze. The man rubbed his head and stood up, clenching his fists, looking menacing. Just then, footsteps echoed from outside. George and a group of lackeys rushed in. "Sebastian, what did these guys do to you?" Realizing something was wrong at the alley entrance, I had called George and told him to bring reinforcements. Victoria suddenly grabbed my sleeve, clinging tightly to me, her body still trembling with fear. Calming myself, I said, "Take care of these guys." Ignoring the curious and gossiping looks from the group, I pulled Victoria away. We walked a good distance before I realized she had been quietly following me the whole time. My chest felt like it was about to burst. I turned around, unable to hold back any longer. "Victoria, do you realize you're about to go to college?" My voice trembled with anger and fear, emotions I hadn't expected. How could she do this? After finally getting through the college entrance exam and reaching a new stage in life, if she had really hurt someone today, her future would be ruined because of me. Victoria looked at me quietly for a moment before asking, "Do you care?" I was stunned. "What?" "Do you care if I do well in the exam or go to college?" she asked. I was speechless, thinking, of course I care. In the original story, you were held back because of Sebastian, but how could I say that? Taking a deep breath, I said, "Of course. You're the top science student in the city. We're classmates and I'm proud of you. I still need your help in the future." Victoria suddenly whispered, "Liar." I was taken aback. "What?" Victoria pulled something from her pocket and placed it in my hand. It was a bank card. "The money you paid for my grandmother's hospital bills is all here. I said I'd repay you, and I meant it." My chest felt like it was stuffed with wet cotton. She had insisted to those people that she had no money because she needed to repay me with her scholarship money. She never owed anyone anything, keeping every account clear. She turned to leave, and I laughed bitterly. "Victoria, you know this means nothing to me. Just to clear things up, you'd rather hit someone with a brick and risk your future?" Victoria paused, then turned back, tears streaming down her face, glistening in the streetlight. That was an instinctive reaction, not because they were asking for money, but because of you. My mind went blank. "What?" "I don't care how they treat me, but you're different," she said, her voice choking. The world seemed to fall silent, and I could hear my heartbeat growing louder. Victoria turned away, her voice trembling. "That money may mean nothing to you, but it's important to me. I can owe anyone, but not you." Something clicked in my mind, and I chased after her, blocking her path. "Victoria," I said, my hands trembling, my ears burning. "What do you mean by all this?" Victoria looked at me silently, making me feel guilty under her gaze. My face felt even hotter. Desperate, I said, "Victoria, you can't leave until you explain." "I thought I made it clear," she said. Summoning my courage, I replied, "It's not clear at all. I didn't understand a word." The bustling street outside seemed distant, leaving this small corner quiet and secluded. Victoria looked up at me. I was a head taller than her, but my bravado felt weak. Finally, she spoke. "I want to kiss you," she whispered, standing on tiptoe to reach my ear. "Please." All other sounds seemed to fade away, leaving only her soft voice and warm breath. Seeing I hadn't responded, she asked again, "Did you understand this time?" Coming back to my senses, I fell into her gaze. The summer night breeze blew, carrying the heat of the day. "Victoria, you said it yourself." I cupped her face and kissed her, my heart pounding. Hearing a noise nearby, I started to turn, but Victoria clung to my shoulders, kissing me again. Her warm breath mingled with mine, our breathing growing rapid. I held her waist tightly and asked, "Who was that?" Victoria pulled back slightly, her breath mingling with mine. "The guys you called over." I was shocked. "They saw us?" Victoria's cheeks flushed. "It's okay, they've left." I was speechless. "Wait, there's something important I need to ask. Victoria, do you still like Ethan?" Victoria paused, seeming amused. "Why do you keep thinking I like him?" I was at a loss. I just guessed. That night after the exam, when I asked if the person you liked was there, you kept looking at him. Victoria buried her head in my chest and said, "That's because you were always looking at him. I wanted to tell you that day, but you seemed happier with others. I thought maybe you were lying about liking me." I couldn't help but mutter, "But I confessed to you that night. Doesn't that mean I got the short end of the stick?" Victoria didn't hear me. "What?" I lifted her face and whispered in her left ear. I said, "I like you, Victoria. If your right ear holds the secrets of your unspoken crush, then your left ear is for loving you." 5 years later, Victoria and I got married. My dad beamed with pride. "This girl is amazing, smart and beautiful, much better than Sebastian." I nodded, equally pleased. "Yes, now you don't have to worry about going bankrupt." My mom's eyes welled up. "That's wonderful. I used to think Sebastian was only after her looks. I didn't expect her to be so talented. We've really hit the jackpot." I was speechless. "Thank you both." At the wedding, George and the guys drank merrily. Even Ethan and Tiffany attended. Their wedding was set for next year. Victoria was in high spirits that day, drinking quite a bit of red wine. When I carried her back to the room, I noticed another wooden carving on the shelf. It was a pair of newlywed figurines. "Victoria, you made me look fat," I teased. Victoria hugged me from behind. "Really?" I pointed to the first one on the top row. "Look, the one you secretly put in my bag after the college entrance exam." I was still slim and handsome. The small, delicate carving showed a boy sitting in a car, his hair blowing in the wind, a bright smile on his face. I only realized on the day we officially got together that her confession had come before mine. But I had tossed the wallet into a drawer at home and never noticed it. Young Victoria had taken a courageous step that nearly made her retreat. "Victoria, if I hadn't gone to find you that day, would our ending be different?" Victoria kissed me. "No. My ending will always be you."